Where does Cursor outperform Claude Code? And where is Claude Code just much better than Cursor? And by the way, what the heck is Sonnet 3.7 Max? And why is it different than Sonnet 3.7 or Sonnet 3.5? Oh, and what is ChatGPT and Gemini doing in all this? Today we talk about our experiences with coding with AI tools. We hope you enjoy.
Humans of Earth, welcome to Will AI Snap That, where I'm your host, Michael Rollins, as well as my co-host, Thanos, he, the system, explain to you the thought processes and the tools that your robotic overlords will one day give you. And we help you curry favor with those same robotic overlords so that, at a time when all of humanity is reduced to nothingness, we may live on with extra peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Thanos, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I just had my annual physical today, and the doctor said I'll be around next week to record. So that's
Turn
good.
your head and cough.
Yeah,
Was it fun?
it was brief. So yes, and it took an hour to get labs after that, so that was a bit more annoying. But I'm now caught up with the news. So take your wins.
Just on the topic of AI, and we're not talking about this today, but radiologists have started to rely more and more and more on AI because AI tends to be really good at spotting things. I think they have been as good as radiologists, like just a little under. And so it's always there's no way, shape, or form that AI is going to replace radiologists in the near future. But it's pretty interesting how some of these tests, which are just straight numbers or looking at pictures, AI is pretty good at. So
That's
pretty neat.
nice that the AI can come back and be like, oh, we can definitely confirm, Mr. Rollins, that this was a scalpel that was left inside you.
Oh, that'd be bad, man. Like, I'm okay if you leave a sponge or
Or a
something, but
clamp or whatever.
right, right. We're not sure how that dental crown got in there, but
We have
we
some
probably need to
ideas.
think it out. So today, Thanos, we are going to give our thoughts and feelings and like debate the pros and cons of the various tools that we have been using over the past, few months, really. And I think so the three tools that we have at our disposal to talk about are just Chat GPT. Some of the more advanced Chat GPT models are really good. Then there's Cursor, which I think both of us have used pretty extensively. And then there's Claude Code, which we also have both used extensively. And each of them has interesting benefits and negatives. So I thought we might want to take a real quick look at it. Let's talk about ChatGPT first, but I really want to spin through it because I think it is the least interesting of them all now. So when you were using just ChatGPT, what were your thoughts and what do you think are there any strengths of it now and any weaknesses?
I started with ChatGPT in this whole
Hmm.
thing, right? Because that was the one that everyone was on,
Hmm.
and it was okay. This was in the beginning of time. I don't know, like a few months ago,
Hmm.
when
Yeah.
we started using
It
these tools. It
wasn't
was
it
a
like January?
Yeah, something like
December,
that. I know,
January, I think? Oh, it was so long
probably a bit
ago.
late to the party in some ways, but it was interesting because you could get a lot of stuff done fairly quickly, but there was a lot of copy pasting involved that was pretty painful. So I gotta say, I don't really use ChatGPT anymore for coding related tasks.
Hmm.
I have the O1 Pro subscription, so I will occasionally send it off for deep research questions, and I'm finding pretty good results with that.
Hmm.
It'll be my go-to because it has an app, and I can kind of recall the app pretty quickly, as opposed to pulling the
Hmm.
browser and pulling up the tab and pulling up the right sort of thing that you need there if you want to ask a question.
Hmm.
And I'll kind of vacillate between O1, 4.5, and O1 Pro. That's kind of my go-to tools there. If I want some super special reasoning, I'll set O1 Pro, but it takes a while, so it's kind of like usually
Yeah.
combined with deep research. Like, okay, go figure it out, come back to me in 20 minutes and let me know what you think.
You don't use
O1, if
O3?
it's something quick that requires reasoning, and then pretty much for everything else, it's 4.5. The
You
remaining
don't.
uses for that for me, is talking to it. So I was shaving this morning, And I had a conversation as to creating a checklist for my children when they leave the house, because always something has been forgotten behind. So I said, hey, I want a
Mhm.
checklist. I want to have like these 10 items on it. Make me a mnemonic that my children can remember that has like 2 words and some cute letters
Mhm.
that they can make it up. And after a little bit of conversation over a shave, it figured out, and then I got 2 words, and my kids will remember fewer things less. So that's kind of like it's a fun way to interact with it. I found I was just chatting to it for 16 minutes, but it's really easy. It's interruptible, which is really nice. You can say as it's talking, it's like no, like do this instead, and that's really
Mhm.
fun. But other than that, I wouldn't say I would use ChatGPT for coding much.
Okay.
Do you use it for
I
coding?
not much anymore. I have a few coding agents that I have been using off and on that are currently using O3 Mini for writing code. I think I'm actually about to switch them to Claude 3.7 Sonnet just because it just seems to be way better at coding. So what I do use Chad GPT daily for is I am currently tracking my macros in order to, reduce my caloric intake and strengthen the, quality of the food that I'm eating. And so I will ask it for recipes. I will ask it for techniques on prepping. I will ask it for, and then I also talk to it daily. Talk. I'm actually still typing where I tell it, I ate this, I ate this, I ate this. It's really good.
You
Like
use a
I can,
specific assistant, or do you keep your day in a thread, or how do you work that?
it's just it's 4.0 with memory.
Okay.
That's all it is. And it's proven. Here's the thing. I'm less worried. I don't think it's perfectly accurate, but it's accurate enough that I have noticed like I'm starting to shed a little weight. And I can tell you it has changed my behavior. And that is probably the primary thing that I needed because now all of a sudden I'm looking at, hey, I really want something sweet, but maybe if I pack some protein in with it, I'll feel better. So now I'm going for like, I'm a notorious snacker. And I found myself all of a sudden going further and further times between like just walking in and randomly grabbing a snack versus now I'll like walk in and walk out without food, which is kind of uncommon. This is a shed in case anybody missed that part. And so I got to go in the house to do things.
That effect, right? When you monitor, when you're looking at a metric, then it tends to change because you know it's
Yes.
being observed. Is that
It's
the
the
Hoffman
observer
effect,
principle.
or
I don't,
it
it's
may
funny
be?
because my kids and I have talked about this a lot. I had like explained to them the quantum uncertainty principle and how the minute you have an observer, behavior changes. And we have spent a lot of time talking about how that actually extrapolates into, rea- reality in the sense of like, yeah, the minute somebody starts watching you, you change. So,
To
but for
diverge too
coding,
much from this, but one
yeah.
final, I kind of like where you're going with that, and I was kind of
Mhm.
thinking the same this morning as I was working out. Can you use ChatGPT like with voice mode to track your workout? So instead of having to walk over to my
Yeah.
sheet and like check off how many sets and reps, I can just yap at
Mhm.
and keep
Yeah.
it open while I'm working out, and then have it print me out the summary at the end so I can put it in my log in some kind of way. So not a coding thing, but maybe that's
Right.
one of the cool uses from the UI that they have.
And this is yet again a divergence, but I was talking to somebody recently and the guy was asking me, he was interested in learning how to code and he was asking me which model would be best. And I said, Chat GPT is a yes man. Chat GPT is going to make you feel really good about yourself. Like, oh my gosh, you're correct. But it will also just tell you yes until it has lied itself blue in the face. But that's actually not a bad, like, habit behavior from somebody that's encouraging you to work out, So make of that what you will. So, all right, let's move on to something a little more interesting, which is Cursor. Tell me about Cursor.
Well, so let's just split this up, right? Because I think there's a bunch of tools that we're going to talk about that will use Claude Sonnet as the underlying model.
Right.
So I want to say generally my experience with Claude Sonnet has been pretty good with coding. And I think
Hmm.
there's 2 or 3 tools under which we use this, and it may be worth calling out what
Yeah.
the strengths and benefits of these tools are.
Okay.
So let's start. Did you say cursor?
Yeah.
So
So, all right. Well, let's take a step back and say that both Claude Code and Cursor, which we're going to talk about, are underpinned by Claude Sonnet. Now,
there's Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and then there's 3.7, and there's multiple versions of 3.7. So you've got 3.7, which is just a fast answer. I think it's called a one shot, where you ask it a question and it just responds, right? Then there's Claude 3.7 Sonnet with deep thinking, where it will, as opposed to its reasoning, more or less, where it will kind of think about what it's saying and you can actually see the thought process before it prints it out. And then there's like Sonnet 3.7 Max or something, which sounds like an iPhone name, but it is fast deep thinking. Like, I think basically they're just throwing a lot of extra inference behind 3.7 Sonnet Max, but I'm not 100% certain that that's the case. There may be more capabilities in that particular model. So
If you did any prep for this podcast, we could probably answer this definitively.
we probably could. Yeah.
I've seen
Absolutely.
3.7 and then 3.7 like with thinking mode, and there's like the normal extended. And then there's how Cursor presents these, which I suspect the max is the 3.7 extended thinking mode, and the other one is the normal. I know recently Cursor changed how they do these. And the one is included in your Cursor subscription, and the other one is like pay as you go, and it's like 5 cents per tool usage. It was pretty spendy. But maybe we should start with if we start to talk about Cursor, there's two things with Cursor that they're probably worth talking about. The one is the integration with the IDE, which is pretty awesome because when you ask it to do something, it can just jump in and do it, and then it shows you diffs, and you can go from file to file and go diff to diff, and you can just approve them one at a time. So you're not using Git as the way of managing this. And then you're subject to whatever your source control is. Because if you're looking at this in Git, you're not getting the benefits of the linter and the syntax highlighting. And if it's done something dumb, you're not going to see it if you're looking at it in Git. So it's nice being able to do this in the IDE, as you can see like the results right away. And the nice thing is it can see the results right away. So if your linter is flagging some issue, or TypeScript is flagging an issue, it says, oh, I noticed this, let me go fix this. And it goes back and fixes it before it sends you the final version. So I think that's noteworthy. And it's a really nice feature. And if you're doing stuff that it's going to be kind of interactive, it's really nice to see. The other nice thing with Cursor is you have the ability of specifying these files with rules. So you can say, hey, if you're doing build me a load function, then I want it to be strongly typed and do it this way. Or if you're building me an API, I want you to check it with Zod or whatever you're doing at the time. And I found that to be quite nice, although I got to say, it doesn't really look at its own rules, even though you told it to apply them and when to apply them. It's not really that good. So sometimes it will spit out some code, it's junk, and you say, hey, dude, you got a rule about this? And it'll go back and say, oh, yes, of course, you're right. Let me go fix this. And then it fixes it, but you have to kind of insist, hey, there's a rule. And sometimes some code I'm very familiar with, it's easy to look at it and be, oh, that doesn't look right. But some code that I haven't written before, it's a framework that I'm not familiar with, I didn't really know that it didn't follow the rule. So sometimes it trips me up and I have to go say, hey, my code reviewer said, you messed this one up, so go make this to the rule. And it's pretty good then applying the rules. It also gets tripped up with white space. It is just useless in fixing white space issues. So if you have trailing characters in a line, it will go and spend 5 or 10 iterations with the tools. I'm going to sed my way into this. I'm going to awk my way into this. And it tries and tries. So I've added a rule saying, don't bother with white space. I can take care of white space for you.
I didn't realize that it struggled with that. Because I asked it to fix some kind of formatting thing the other day, and it went it went on and on and on. It was sed and awk and pattern matching, and I was like, just quit. I don't know what you're doing over here.
That said, I haven't tried this, and now that I'm saying it out loud, it feels so obvious. I could make a rule that says if you have trouble with white space, run this command that I know clears out white space issues. And check that command in YOLO mode so it can just do it. And then I'm done. So maybe that's an action item for me to try out.
Can you give it specific commands to run in YOLO mode? Are you able to basically say, oh, well, if I tell you to run tests, you can just run these tests. You don't have to check with me.
I don't know. I'm going to have to check the setting on that. I know you can do this with Claude Code. Because it says, let me do these kinds of commands. But I got to check if you can do this with Cursor. Maybe we'll chat more about that when we get to Claude Code, because that's also a fun piece of tooling.
Yeah.
What's your experience with Cursor?
So, by the way, I did a real quick look at what specifically Claude 3.7 Sonnet Max is. It uses tools. And so
Okay.
that is what sets it apart. It is more of an agentic, I hate that word, an agentified, which is good. Sounds
Right.
like good other
Because
word. I
running
tell
send
you
on the
what.
command line is like sending
Yeah.
an agent to solve your problems.
Yeah. No. So Claude, the Max version of Claude is basically agentic, where it can use tools. And I'd be interesting to see if we can provide our own tools. We've already talked about in the past where I wrote a bunch of tools for another coding agent and then eventually just told Cursor to use those tools. And so that was always really interesting, which might be a way to kind of go into it. Like if your repo has a set of tools that you want this thing to leverage, that might be the way to go at it. So my experience with Cursor has been pretty good. It is, there are times when it's just freaking amazing, and then there's times when it's miserable. And what I have found is that it's really good with small context windows. But the minute the context window gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it will start losing its brains. And so the idea here is like, if I really, really want to focus on a set of work, I might put 4 files into the context window and start issuing commands based on that. But if I just tell it to go search the code base and find me something, it can go bad. It really
Yeah.
can go bad. I had it the other day, actually, working for some of the stuff we're working on together. I told it, I was like, just write a test, okay? Write a whole test, not just a test, like a whole new file for tests. And I was like, wait, there's got to be an existing set of tests that address this code. And it just couldn't find it. And then come to find out, I couldn't find it either. So I don't know if there wasn't tests on that code previously, but it just added a whole testing file, which at the end of the day is not like, that's not the end of the world. But it will,
Generally, I haven't found Cursor to get too eager. Like, it generally will do what you say and not a lot more.
yeah,
So it's been pretty good at limiting itself. Though I have had some great coding sessions with it where you sit and you just get so much stuff done and it feels so productive. And
yeah,
then I've had other times when I ask it to do the simplest, dumbest thing, and it comes with something that looks so insanely moronic. And I'm like, no,
yeah,
no, 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 dude, like this way. And then it does something even dumber. And then the third time, and
yeah.
it's like, you know what? You're going to purgatory for the
You're
rest of the
done.
day.
You're done.
I'm going
Yeah,
to Claude Code, and then we'll
yeah.
come back again to you in a few days when I've
It,
forgotten about this.
I have noticed that as well. Once Cursor starts stumbling, it's almost like you have to close Cursor down to get it to not stumble anymore.
And it's like I don't know if this is we're just imagining this because in theory, when you hit Command N and you give it a new context window, like it's
Right.
a new cursor. So I don't know if there's something wrong with the way that I asked that day or like that task that I was doing or whatever. But sometimes it just shocks me at how good it is with certain tasks, and then it just goes super dumb in other tasks. But which I haven't really. I gotta say I haven't really seen that with any of the other tools that we're about to talk about.
Okay. In general, there is one strength of Cursor with Claude that is the best, which is I can actually see the code. And I can see the code within the context that it's meant to be. And so we'll get into Claude Code, but one of my big complaints with Claude Code is that, like, I don't have, like, it goes and writes code, and I don't have a grasp of what it's actually doing. And so, but with Cursor, it's like, okay, well, I'm literally watching and looking at the file that it's changing. And I think really honestly, one of the biggest strengths that Claude or that Cursor has is the accept, or accept all, where it shows you what it's changing and then shows you what it changed to. It's a really very nice inline diff view. And I love it. I love it. So
Yeah, that part is certainly not much to compare it with. There's some of the tools, by the way, that you can use if you have VS Code, that you
mhm,
can then plug in your coding engine, your LLM of your choice, and use
mhm,
them in the same way. I think
yeah.
those may have shorter instruction sets because I think Cursor is adding some magic sauce in between the two
Mhm.
there
Yeah.
in terms of how they prompt it. But there are other ways that you can get these sort of things done. I used to be on the JetBrains suite, and they had their own thing that was integrated, and that wasn't really that good to begin with, so I've disabled it and haven't really used it since, but I expect there's probably some integrations there as well, since that's a IDE first company.
My guess on, and I've thought this for a while, is that one of the secret sauces to Cursor is I think they're doing something really clever with the context window. And I don't know exactly what it is that they're doing, but I agree that I ran into an interesting set of error messages recently, yesterday or the day before, where it kept telling me that the code wasn't indexed and I should wait until the code was indexed. And I'd never seen that before, and I'm certainly not surprised by it, but the code was already indexed. I knew it was already indexed. I've been working in this project in Cursor for like weeks now. And so it makes me wonder if they're doing some kind of like smart things behind the scenes with the context windows in order to get the good results that they get most of the time.
So I'm going to have a slightly different opinion because I found Claude Code to be better with context than Cursor. I think Cursor I have to be fairly manual with telling you what to look at, whereas Claude Code is a bit broader, but we can maybe save that, or we can shift gears and talk about Claude Code.
Yeah.
Actually, no, before we go to Claude Code, we should talk about the pricing of Cursor.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think it's what, $20 a month for just a base subscription.
Right, but that has like 500 requests, which I ran out in about a week and a half.
Yep. So you get like, it's basically like $20 a month up until this point. And then it's like a reasonable rate beyond that. Unless you go to the max model, at which point it's a nickel. Every time you hit enter, if you're on that model, the nickel, you just hit enter. We like our nickel like every single time. I do not use max in Cursor. It's just I can see myself spending lots and lots of money that way accidentally, even though I'm doing it in Claude Code. But the pricing model for Cursor is intriguing. I have no idea if they're profitable or not, but I'm thinking maybe not. What do you think about
it? I think it's been, so far, people that do pricing in these companies don't get any ideas, but I think it's still paid for itself, right? Like I would probably pay a lot more than what I'm paying for that. That said, I am beginning to be a bit more aware of what I'm doing, right? So yeah, I also haven't turned on the max much. I was just logging in, and apparently I've hit my 501 out of 500 fast requests, and they've charged me some amount of money here. So I'm in the 2571 out of my $50 limit for this month. I have found, like, again, jumping ahead, like Claude Code, I've been spending actual money in Claude Code, and I think I've been getting better results. So I've been using the regular mode for easy things when I'm in Cursor, especially if I have to do a lot of stuff that needs to be done visually. And for me, harder tasks or more complicated, I've been going to Claude Code. And maybe we shift gears and talk about that, unless you got anything else for Cursor.
No, let's talk about Claude Code.
So Claude Code, if anyone hasn't played with this, is a command line tool. Comes from Claude. You can just run Claude, and it brings you up a nice little thing. And you can ask it things the same way you would do it, and then it starts giving you little diffs and says, okay, like, this is what I'm proposing. Are you cool with this? And one of the things right off the bat that I've noticed, I don't know if you had the same experience, is I think it gives you like little diffs in an order that makes a bit more sense to me, that is easier for me to sort of reason through it. So if I said, write me a new API, you'll write me the new API, and it'll be cool. And then it'll say, okay, let me then go find all the callers for this API. Okay. And then it shows me the first caller, and it's like, can I fix this to call the new API? And I'm like, yes. And can I make the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth? Okay. And then let me do some cleanup, and here's my cleanup. So even though it's smaller, even though it's outside the IDE, so it's harder to kind of look at, it's smaller and kind of gives it in sensible order that I found very pleasant and satisfying. For new projects where I've been getting greenfield code, they gave me bigger chunks. And oftentimes it was like, okay, you know what? I don't really care. I'll look at it in the IDE when you're done. So I'd accept like a few code changes, big ones in a row, and then I go look at it in the IDE and go like, okay, this makes sense. Or go ask it again and say, please make changes. So with that as a start, like, did you get similar experiences, or did you get diverging experiences with Claude?
With Claude Code, there's either a lot of magic or none. It is very, very, and most of the time there's magic. Most of the time. And every once in a while, it just absolutely obliterates all goodwill that it has built up, right? Like there's a goodwill bucket and Claude Code just fills that thing in loving ways and then absolutely obliterates the bucket. So one of the things that's really interesting about Claude Code is that it is agentic, right? And it is treating the command line as a bunch of tools. And it's brilliant. Like literally brilliant. When I originally read the idea, it's like, oh, well, Claude Code's only on the command line. And I was like, what? That's ridiculous. And then I started using it and I was like, damn, this thing is better at the command line, right? And I've been a native on the command line for decades. And so I've actually like learned things watching Claude Code use the command line. But so if it's greenfield, I have straight up just said, click, I go YOLO on it and I tell it, just make it happen. And then I go test it. And then I'll come back and ask it to make alterations. It took, so one of the things that we have to have done for Engine Room is I need a CSV import. And I was kind of like struggling with a few just really aggravating issues. And so I finally tossed it into Claude Code and was basically like, this is what I need. Just make sure it works. And damn if it didn't do it. Like I had, and here's the crazy thing. It's writing coding agents. And so it went through and modified the prompts. It went through and modified the tools that the coding agents have access to. It did all of these little subtle changes to the coding agents that made the whole thing just work. And it's definitely stuff that I could have done, but it did it in 10 minutes. It cost me $5 in that 10 minutes, right? Like, and that's something we really need to talk about because like I feel like every time I hit enter, like if I sit down and use Claude Code for like 30 minutes to an hour, like I'm coming out having spent, anywhere from $5 to $10.
Good thing, but that's like a really productive hour. I get like a lot of stuff done in that hour.
Yeah. And that's the thing is it's like, I will happily trade that. When we were talking about O1 Pro back in the day, we were paying $200 a month for O1, right? Because we felt that it was worth it. Because if it saved us an hour, then, that's roughly our own rates, right? Ish. But now it's like you can sit down and spend $5 in 20 minutes and just have the task done. And so it is definitely worth it. And also, boy, an entire day of coding with Claude Code would be expensive.
Yeah.
It's
So
just
I've been using it pretty much. I'm using one of the two tools when I code. I've racked up, I don't know, 20, 30, $40 for Cursor and probably $75 for Claude Code. And it's still super worth it, right? Even if it's like $500 a month, I am like way more than 2x productive in it. There's some things you mentioned, scripts, I know the command line pretty well, but I've been writing for one client. I've been writing this like long ass script. Oh my goodness. Like it's like, I need a stripe command to do this. And it's done in like 10 seconds. It would take me like 20 minutes to look up every damn parameter and get it right. Yeah. So it's just amazing time saver. SQL, like I can write SQL. But like, hey, join these 3 tables on these fields and then grab these fields and twist it around and give me the dates by this. It would take me an hour to write that. Like I ship it into Claude Desktop, which we also have to talk about, and Claude Web, Claude.ai, the chat Claude.
Okay. Oh yeah. I gotcha.
And get an answer like right away. So these are also pretty freaking amazing tools. So the cost is a thing, and I think that forces you to use it for like the harder use cases. So I was doing some refactorings over the weekend that were really tough, hard refactorings. Now the really, really tough ones I kind of tend to hand do because like I don't even trust that thing to get it right. But there was somewhere I had to. It's like this really messy code base. It's 10 files, 1,000 lines each. And I said, look, I need to like visualize this. So look into these 10 files in it. Look in these folder. And now that's what it shines, I think, in creating context.
Yeah.
Because it can go and figure out with the tools and figure out where you need to look at. Look in these 10 files and build me a mermaid picture of what talks to what. Boom. And it saves the mermaid photo in the folder. You can visualize it with the right tools. And now I can see everything, right? And I'm saying, okay, like I'm seeing this kind of area over here that it has kind of more stuff like this. Can you like group these for me and then like move the functions from each file in the right groups? Amazing. Like that would have taken me hours and hours of work, and it was able to rearrange it for the better part of moving functions in through files and grouping them according to roughly what they do and how they're related to each other really freaking well. So I was able to wrangle in one weekend a ridiculous amount of code. Ask me next week when it hits production what happened there. But that was pretty amazing.
Yeah. So one thing I have found that Claude Code is abysmal at is when I want it to reference an image and make UI changes based on that image. And I like, so it's that little, just like this little toy game I've been messing around with where the idea is it's a hex grid and you can move units and make improvements, just like a little army game, right? Claude Code could not get it right. Like, could not. Like, I just went back and forth, and I probably spent $15-20 with Claude Code saying, God, you cannot get
Do
this
you
right.
download the image and store it in like a temp folder, and then you say, here's some context of this image, or how did you do it?
Okay, so I was giving it instructions on how I wanted it to change the images. And I did not put the screen captures into like a temp folder so it could see it. And maybe that would have made a difference. And what I ended up doing was taking it to Cursor and doing exactly that with Cursor and saying, hey, this is what I want you to look at right here. I need this to be fixed. And then it, with a couple iterations, we were good to go.
Well, I guess underneath, so there shouldn't be tremendous differences for that. But the copy paste mechanics for me always were awkward between those two tools. So if I have an image, I will usually go to Chat Claude on the web and just, use Shotter as my screenshotting tool, copy paste into that, and say, do something about this.
Yeah.
By the way, those image recognition tools are freaking amazing because I have like some tools that will just not output you any meaningful format, but you can see it on the web. So you just drag a thing, copy paste it, and saying, hey, here's like 10 tables I need this operation performed on, and boom, it just gives you the command. So
yeah,
super amazing.
Yeah, it is pretty incredible.
And do we have honorable mentions? I think I have 2.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Aero is a cool tool. It looks like Claude Code, but you can bring your own API keys. So you can use it with anything that you want. Now, I don't think it has some of the agentic secret sauce for Claude Code, but it has some interesting stuff that it does, and it's open source. Interesting, it has an architect mode and a coding mode, and you can put different LLMs on each of these. So you can maybe use like a reasoning engine for your architect mode that will take a little longer and think through it, and then when you hand over to coding, you can give it a coding engine. Played with it a bit. It's nice, but I think in my kind of subjective experience, I liked Claude Code results better. So I haven't used Aero in a few days. It's kind of sitting on my shelf.
Okay.
The other honorable mention I'm going to say is Chat, Claude Chat, because that seems to be my go-to tool if I have something that needs pasting into, and it's like a big pasting into or an image. And I don't want it to modify code. I just wanted an answer. It's not easy to do in Claude Code. You got to switch your cursor into the chat mode rather than the agent mode, and then remember to switch it back. And it's like a tiny window on the side, so it's annoying. So I find myself going back to Claude Chat. Now that's another $20 a month, but that's kind of like $20 a month in unlimited Claude. So I find that for every dumb questions, I'm not chewing my cursor allotment, and I'm not chewing my Claude Code allotment. And for $20, I can kind of ask a lot of things, and it seems better at coding tasks than the ChatGPT. So the total bill is $200 a month for OpenAI, $20 a month for Claude Chat, $75 for Claude Code, and $20 a month to $40 a month for Cursor. So that's
that's not cheap.
It's not cheap.
I
think it's way more productive still.
Oh yeah, no, I actually just downgraded back to the $20 version of OpenAI. I think I'm still paying for Claude. I need to go look. Then there's the, 20-ish, $20 to $40 a month for Cursor. And then also, probably anywhere from $20 to $100 a month for Claude Code, depending on how much I use it.
Yeah, I think the one to maybe go first will also be for me the O1 Pro, but I've been enjoying
Yeah.
it, sending it on really deep research stuff with O1 Pro, and it's been giving me pretty good results. I've had a few things recently, like at least one or two a week,
Mhm.
where I really want some deep research on something, send it off. I needed to compare community platforms for a client. And it went in, I said, compare me all of these. These are my parameters. I wonder how stable the companies are. These are all the things. And it went, did a really detailed analysis that kind of narrowed it down for me. So it saved me like, I don't know, several hours of work. So I think that seems kind of worthwhile still.
I do have another honorable mention, Gemini. So I got the, high level version of Gemini for free for some reason. I
That's
can't
the
remember.
Google one, right?
That's the Google one.
So you can say, hey, how
And
should I code this? And you're saying, have you considered building it in with an ad model?
well, just remember, every startup is one pivot away from being an ad platform.
Oh boy. Yeah, like I think there's some that own our DNA that as of today are going to be going to an ad-based model.
So no, actually, I find Gemini to be the best at architectural discussions. And so Gemini tends to make, like, if I want, so for instance, I was thinking about how do I build a brain, right? How do I build a Michael Rollins brain where I can go and just, like, let's say I text myself things throughout the day and it gets sent somewhere. And then later on, I can say, hey, listen, I sent you, what does my to-do list need to be today? Right. And have it kind of like keep track. So like an assistant, whatever. And now I haven't built this thing and I probably won't, but I went to talk. I was like, let me try Gemini. So I had this like really good conversation with Gemini where it ended up making these extraordinarily strong recommendations for bits and pieces of the architecture, where it was like, oh, well, given your usage and what you're thinking about doing, it recommended Mongo with scalar vectors. And I never would have looked at Mongo. I didn't even know Mongo was still around. I guess it's a big deal still. I don't know. All I think about is web scale, right?
It was still a big thing, by the way.
It is, but I still can, to this day, cannot get past that one cartoon. What is it? Web scale. There's old people that love that joke, but all the Gen Zers out there are like, what? So
What sequel?
what sequel? Yeah, no, but it actually came up with this really interesting architecture that I did put down on paper, and I started looking at things. I was like, that's pretty smart. So Gemini, I tend to go to for my architectural thought process.
I will try that out next time. Make sure it
Yes.
doesn't introduce any backdoors to my architecture for building in an ad model later.
Hey, everybody loves a good ad model. So, all right, Bonis, is there anything else?
The one thing to maybe mention is, and this could be a whole new episode that we can maybe do, which is how life is beginning to shift. You're beginning to be able to focus your attention into more architectural choices of how do I
Yeah.
build this in a scalable way? Like, for example, for client X, I have 4 engineers, maybe I'll have 8 engineers by the end of the year. How are these folks going to communicate with each other? Like, what does the architecture look like? How do I use the AI tools to restructure the code to get there? You can build greenfield stuff fairly quickly. And again, you have to really be careful and enforce what kind of rules you want to have so that the AI can keep iterating on this database. I think I mentioned in a previous podcast how if you don't supervise it and go pure vibe, that once you get a couple of hours into it, then it just falls on itself and it's unable to sustain. So it's super interesting as how the role of engineers is now changing. There's a lot of stuff that I used to delegate that now I may tackle some of these sort of myself because it's very doable fairly easily. And the roles are changing. So I'm super interested in tracking that over time and seeing how that works and how that affects the whole software development process.
So I'll preview this. I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that. And, there's a lot of pushback and fear in the software engineers that I see on like LinkedIn and that I know in general, where they're like, oh, we can't be replaced. Yes, you can. Everybody can be replaced. And
Well, is it replaced or is it your role's going to be different?
see, that's the thing is I think the roles will begin to change significantly Now, do I think we're going to be in a place at the end of this year where on December 31st, all software engineers lose their jobs? No, I don't. Do I
Unless you
think
work for the federal government, in which case,
that's a different politics, Donna? But do I think that I need to, like, somebody asked me to take a look at the resume for someone that they're just about to enter their senior year in college. And I made a recommendation to that person. I said, you need to start thinking of yourself as a technical product manager, because the amount of coding you will be doing is probably smaller. But if you have a better grasp of what a product is, you will be more effective. And so I can also see the idea that, as opposed to, the architect role will be resurrected. Because it used to be like everybody wanted to be an architect. And nowadays, you don't really hear that role very much anymore. You hear like staff engineer, right? I see a world in which all of a sudden the architect becomes an important figure again.
I'm going to disagree, but agree with you in a way
Okay.
that I'm doing both at the same time. I think the at some point everyone was an architect and everyone is an architect because they have to make broader choices. That's kind of the value isn't in just building stupid little chunks of code, but it's figuring out how
Right.
they fit, right? Everyone has to be a product manager because they at minimum have to interact with other product managers and figure out what this needs to do, right? Because the role of engineers is take vague requirements and translate them into precise code. So I think that was the case before, but I think
Mhm.
that's going to be so. I disagree in that like it's going to change because I think it's going to be the same. But I think what is going to change is that you're going to have less emphasis on the code writing, even
Yes.
less emphasis, because now it's going to be fairly straightforward, not done, but fairly straightforward to get that done for you. So all the other skills become even more important. What troubles me is that you will still need to know good code when you see it and know bad code when you see it. And I don't know how you're going to get there if you haven't, gone
And me
through
too.
the grudge part.
The engineer that I see as the most susceptible to losing their job is the not my job engineer. The engineer that sits there and they're like, this is my domain. I will look at everything in this domain. And if it's outside of this domain, it's not my job. And I
Yeah,
think that,
that engineer was always susceptible to be gone, right? Because
yeah,
the engineer that sits in their cube and just does what they're told and is a ticket machine was never a good engineer. The
right.
engineer that went out of his cube and talked to people and resolved blockers and got broader context for how to apply their skills to their job, that was the good engineer. So I think that's going to continue to be the good engineer. But the
Hmm.
question is, how is that engineer also going to acquire the technical skills to
Yeah.
to to supervise the AI, right? Because the AI is going to do the work, but you still need to supervise it. And if you haven't done it, how do
Then
you
how do
know
you
it?
know to do? Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
It's
don't
going
know,
to
like
be,
maybe we're over indexing on the point because maybe the junior engineer will use the AI to grow themselves into that engineer, right? And they'll
maybe.
write some shitty code and ask the AI why is this bad, and the AI will give them some thoughts, and then they can use their own experiences and judgment to say if that's a good idea or a bad idea, and kind of build from there.
I think this would be a phenomenal discussion for the future because we're starting to have the discussion right now. But I
All
think
right, next episode.
here's another fun one to really think about is, what do legacy, like, what does this look like in a legacy company? Are they hamstrung more than a smaller company to implement this kind of stuff? I'd be interesting. You of the two of us are the one that has a much, like, broader grasp of the, you know, requirements of running a large engineering team, in the sense that you have processes you like and you put in place everywhere. And so it'll be I really would like to hear you talk a little bit more about that. So,
Let's
but
grab that for the next episode because I don't want to go off on a
yes.
rant because I have
Oh God, yeah, no. By the
strong
way,
opinions on this subject.
ladies and gentlemen, when you let's talk about this, we might get angry Thanos. Okay, we're definitely gonna get
The
the
gauntlet's
Thanos
going to come
that
off the
become
floor.
dismissive. He might snap, folks. He might snap. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming along on Will I Snap That? I am your host, Michael Rollins, and you have been joined as always by my co-host, Thanos. The Don't. And with that, we will see you all next week. Hasta vista.